Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Mairena. I will be your moderator for today's panel entitled Venture Capitalists Give Insider Advice to Help You Get Funded. And I hope that the audience here will leave with a better understanding on how to approach venture capitalists and gain insights into what they're looking for with entrepreneurs. And before I start, a brief introduction about myself. So I've been working in tech for over 12 years, started in semiconductor and then transitioned over to enterprise artificial intelligence after I graduated with my MBA in 2019. But more importantly, I am a limited partner of the Lab Fund, which provides catalytic early stage funding to promising startups founded by URM entrepreneurs, starting with MIT alumni. So happy to be here. And now I would like to welcome our distinguished panelists. So first, can I give a round of applause for Dr. Paul Campbell? We'll call him Paul for the remainder of this discussion, and also Morgan Mahlock as well. And
good morning.
Good morning, both of you. And we'll also have a couple others joining us shortly. Both Daniel and Pilar. But to get us going, it's such an honor to have you both, and want us to start with some brief introductions. Just please keep them brief to a minute so we can maximize our time. 3 things, so tell us your name, your company, and your title, and what you and your organization are doing to help fund business owners. And after a round of discussion, we will field questions from the audience. So we'll start with Paul, and then we'll follow with Morgan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Campbell, a co-founder of Brown Venture Group, based here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. My title is I'm a managing partner and co-founder of the fund and the GP, and our focus is on Black, Latinx, and Indigenous technology founders. So happy to be with you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Morgan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for making it out. I work at Voltron Data, which is an early stage startup. I'm director of product strategy at Voltron, and it's a data infrastructure company. I do investing on the side. Previously, my primary role was in investing, and currently I scout invest, which I can tell you a little bit more about for a fund called Coast to Noah Ventures.
Awesome. And I will add, before we started this conversation, while we were in the green room, both of them are astute musicians. So happy to see that as a common thread between both of them. And so I also would like to welcome our 2 additional panelists as well, Pilar Johnson and Daniel Acheampong. So if they can both start, they can join us shortly, and they can introduce themselves. If not, we'll just get started, and we'll start with a warm-up question here. So we'll start with you, Morgan, and then feel free to chime in as well, Paul. What does an ideal first impression look like for you? Can you give an example of a person or company that made a great first impression, whether it was via a cold email or an in-person pitch?
Yeah, this is a great question. Tough warm-up question. But I think, to me, a great first impression is just someone that comes in really prepared. At least from my side, whenever I'm talking to companies, I try to have researched the founder's background, learn as much as I can about what the company's doing before I chat with them. And I think it's nice to have that same effort kind of mutually from the other side. So I think people coming in just super prepared for the conversation is helpful to me.
Yeah, I would just echo that winging it won't work. You know, you really have to be prepared. You have to know who you're pitching in front of, what kind of investments they've made in the past, so that you can use language that they're familiar with, because you're already, as a person of color specifically, you're already coming up with the uphill battle by you just being in the room from the get-go. So you have to know how to hit them with a crisp message and make sure that you're using language they're familiar with.
Awesome. Great insights. And now we do have our 2 additional panelists here. So first, I would like to welcome up Daniel Acheampong to introduce himself, and also Pilar Johnson, if they are up there. Hey, Pilar.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you?
Welcome.
Sorry for being a couple of minutes late. Of course, internet problems in the morning. It just wouldn't be a morning without some kind of issue.
No worries. Hey, you're bringing in the energy. I love it.
I got it.
To start, hey Daniel, I'll introduce you shortly. But for Pilar, if you can, your name, your company, your title, and how you and your organization helps fund business owners. We'll start with you, and then Daniel, you can introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Pilar Johnson. I'm co-founder of Debut Capital, co-founder and managing partner of Debut Capital. And our mission is to invest in Black, Latinx, and Indigenous founders in the early stages. So we focus on pre-seed through Series A, but really enjoy investing in pre-seed and seed. Just it gives us that opportunity to build that relationship with the founder and provide an additional value add beyond capital.
Awesome. And Daniel, good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. It's so good to see everybody here. And Andrew and team, thank you so much for putting this on. And for myself, so I'm the co-founder of Visible Hands and general partner there. And we started Visible Hands really as a platform to identify and invest in the limitless potential of women and people of color. As we all know, the stats that are out there and the lack of funding. So for us, it was something that not only was it personal, but it was just really critical to tap into and support the opportunity base. We also, we have a fund structure, but we also have an accelerator, which is virtual first 14 weeks. And we see that as an opportunity to not only provide capital, but really provide hand-on support. And we structure our accelerator slightly different than the typical, that we customize it in a way, imagine kind of an internal McKinsey. We want to identify what are the 3 things that our founders need to get to, from say 0 to 0.1, 0.2, 0.5, when we support them to get there. So we invest also from pre-seed, approaching seed as well.
Awesome. Well, now glad to we already had a warm up, and I actually want to get to dive into each of your individual experiences a bit with the following questions. So I'll ask each and every one of you some targeted questions, and hopefully you can share some insight based on your lived experiences. So starting up top with Morgan. So as a director of product strategy at Voltron now, you can really help entrepreneurs think about how they pitch their products. What advice do you have for that part of the pitch?
Yeah, I really liked this question. So I think my kind of thoughts on this are, first, storytelling is really important. I think as a founder, like, it's your job to sell the vision of the company and galvanize people, get them on board. So I think being able to tell that story of, like, this is where we are today. We need you as investors, or we need you as employees to get on board and help, like, join this rocket ship. I think that aspect is really important. Also, hiring, just demonstrating as an early stage company, there are different levers that you can pull to show potential employees value. So, for example, as many of you know, when you join a startup, you get equity often as an employee, and maybe your salary is lower than it might be at a huge tech company or something, but you have that equity. And that's kind of part of the storytelling of, like, join this rocket ship. This equity will be way more valuable in the future, ideally, than it is now. So, like, let's work towards that future together. So I think those things are important. And I think at the end of the day, it is the role of the CEO and kind of management of the company to keep the company capitalized and just to be able to share the vision with the broader market. So those were the things that struck me immediately as important.
Yeah, thank you, Morgan. I definitely resonate with it, as I've been in my own journey from an early stage startup and on the different rounds of funding. Switching now, you have said that you try to innovate where venture capital has gone wrong. And what has gone wrong, especially for the BIPOC community, and how has your firm been able to overcome this obstacle?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of the lens that we come to this work with is through the lens of behavior economics. And you study Dr. King and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey, and each one of them was trying to go after humanizing. There's an economic piece to the conversation. But I realized that, we realized collectively that one of the things we're trying to do is trying to attack racism head on. So by using technology as the platform to focus on, we can more effectively bypass racial cognitive biases, gender discounting, things like that. Because when you solve problems with technology, nobody knows the color of your skin, if you're a woman, if you're a man. All they know is that it works. And so it's really a way to really create that space and then the higher margins, because the goal really is to create generational and economic resiliency and transferable wealth. But what you find is that as a person of color trying to raise money, you can read all the books on how to do it, but they're still written from a lens of somebody who doesn't look like us. And so they'll teach you all these great things, but the reality is the minute you're stepping into the room, you're already at a disadvantage, because in a $70 trillion industry, they're used to seeing traditionally white men come up to the room. So the minute a woman comes in or a person of color, they subconsciously think, this person doesn't look like the others. So they start to ask you more risk-based questions. And what we've found is the better thing to do raising money, even after we make an investment to somebody, is start with FOMO, fear of missing out. We're taught in business school, find a pain point, then bring the solution, and then talk about the value of it. But what you have to do is start with the FOMO, the big opportunity that they're missing out on, and why you are the person to be able to do that for them. And the cultural lenses, even hip hop, you can even give an example, would have never came up to sing if it was all one group of contributors. And also realizing in that tension, you're also not trying to make them feel that guilt that oftentimes happens when you talk about disparities. And so we really focusing on the FOMO gets them off the disparities and thinking, how could an at-risk youth be investable? I get people asking all the time as LP investors, hey, aren't Black people risky investments? And I have to say, actually, no. In 2014, as example, Black women were the most educated entrepreneur group in the entire country. Yet the percentage was 0.0006%, statistically insignificant. So you're missing out on this opportunity. So instead of starting with a disparity-based approach, we encourage entrepreneurs to focus on an abundance and more of a FOMO, because they need you, because they're missing out on these huge opportunities. And then these unicorns are sitting outside this gated community, and they're not getting access to it. So I usually turn that on their head and tell people use FOMO first versus trying to talk with your pain point.
Awesome. And I love this tangible advice on how entrepreneurs can improve, the way they position their pitch. Now, shifting over to Pilar, telling your personal story to an investor is important to you. What specific advice do you have for founders to tell a great story that gets your attention and interest? Should founders start with their story?
Yeah, I think so. That's one of my favorite parts of the pitch before we get into the company. And I want to know where you're coming from and why it's important to you. I think one area that Debut is always looking to see is that this problem that you're passionate about and trying to solve for is authentic to you, that you didn't just read in a book, oh, there's money to be made here, and that it's personal to you. And so I think that really ties into your story. I think it's an advantage for you to include that in your pitch. It just helps, I think, the investor kind of connect and feel more engaged in your pitch and what you're essentially trying to get us to buy into. So I always really enjoy that, and I know that more traditional VC, so like the older generation of white men might not really tend to focus on that. They might want to just get to the financials, but I definitely feel like there's this new movement going through in VC where it isn't a disadvantage to share that personal story. I think it really helps. So my advice would be, to really when you're putting your pitch together, your pitch deck, maybe your story doesn't have to be a slide, but while you're going through it, definitely think of a couple of, just areas that you want to touch on and connect it to, tie it into the product and into the overall vision. And I think that is, key.
Yeah, amazing. So to continue along the lines of just, listening to founder pitches and different styles that resonate and make sense. And Daniel, I know you hear a lot. You have your, accelerator. You're a leader of this pre-seed fund and obviously this accelerator. Can you describe a little bit of the insights you've seen there when it comes to the pitches you hear and what really resonates with you from your context?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Pilar that, you know, the personal stories and sharing that, I think, is actually is a huge advantage. And part of the reason why for me I like to hear that is I think founders who have clarity on the problem tend to move faster and also be more productive. And so the folks who have that clarity on the problem, I think, tends to have a more closer association as a personal connection to that, or there's a inclination to learn it in a personal way. So I think just getting closer to the problem, and I emphasize focusing more on the problem than the solution, because the solution could be iterated, but once you really deep dive into the problem in a personal way, I think it makes you a better founder. So then when you are actually in front of the VC or whoever is giving you capital, you're not making it up. It's like, I get this, I've experienced it, or I've seen someone close to me who've experienced it, and these are the data points to show why is a huge opportunity, as Paul is saying.
Awesome. Thanks for those insights, Daniel. And now kind of want to shift to more of like our insights and learnings through our networks and communities. So for more, you spent a few years as a senior associate at InQtel, the strategic investment arm of the intelligence community. You're well connected through the Black VC as its former communications director and All-Raise. What are some of the lessons you have learned from the inside of these organizations that you can share with the founders raising money?
Yeah, one main thing came to mind when I was thinking about this question, and it's just the fact that this industry is very much a relationship business. So as an investor, for example, even in my scout investing capacity now, I really like to get to know founders way before they're fundraising. I like to just become friends with these people. If I get to invest in the company they're thinking about or may build in the future, like that's a plus. But I think I just try to develop friendships with various people in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and I think that goes a long way. So from the entrepreneur perspective, I think just reaching out to investors, kind of developing relationships with them, specifically those aligned to the area that you're building in or that you think you might be building in. So if I'm going to build a consumer product, I might go approach Mavron or Forerunner as kind of investors to start building relationships with. So I think that was kind of the biggest thing that came to mind. And if interesting, can talk at some point too more about like tactical ways to get more involved in these funds, because a lot of them now do have kind of different accelerators and programs that are available to people thinking about starting companies.
Amazing. Yes, Morgan. And we're right now kind of talking a lot about the power relationships and such, and shifting over to Paul here. You often talk about the friendship gaps in our communities. Can you explain this concept and how your firm helps to solve this problem?
Yeah, that is one of the biggest problems we have, because what most people don't realize, the biggest issue is not just financing, it's a relationship gap, a friendship gap. 80% of deal flow comes from closed communities, essentially. It's the same thing for hiring talent and things of that nature. And as I was looking at these issues where people say, Dr. Campbell, I can't think of people to hire or people to invest in. And I'm like, well, I'm seeing them all over the place, specifically people of color. And so I said, we have to shift our thinking from doing things for communities of color to doing things with communities of color. Doing things for is a project. Doing things with is relationship. And we have to move at the speed of relationship. And so what's happening is, as a result of redlining, most of us understand how that affected communities of color. But what it did for non-diverse contributors is it separated them relationally. So they can't think of somebody to hire or someone to invest in. And it takes us longer to actually get that investment because we have to build a relationship when they've actually separated us already. So we unpacked and created a new language to help folks, who wanted to lean into the space to say, hey, look, let's talk about cultural residency. And cultural residency is a slow process, just like Morgan just talked about, where you're building relationships with people. You're going down to support Black-owned businesses. You're going down to get your hair cut if you're going to get it, from a barber. But you're not going down to do inner city work or work with at disadvantaged individuals. You're going down to build relationships with communities of high potential individuals. And so we have to focus on land relationally, expand strategically, and then shift the language from a disparity conversation to an abundance, like I said earlier. So like, hey, I don't want to miss out on this thing, but I need cultural residency in order to build that capacity to make better investments.
Amazing, Paul. And even before this conversation, we talked about a lot of the funding gap happens for the BIPOC communities around the friends and family round, right? In the pre-seed round, where we just don't have that generational wealth to back us up as we try to raise our first, round. Shifting over to Pilar. So, on that note, you have experience from seeing pre-seed, seed, and some Series A investing. So a wide range of, different types of levels of funding. What are your thoughts around this concept of relationships? And does that change over time as you kind of progress up these funding ladders?
Yeah, I think VC is all about people and relationships, and it's networking, and it never stops. And I think as an investor, it's our job to also focus on networking, because as our portfolio grows, you definitely want to something that we're starting to see is, okay, we need to expand our network to include investors that focus on Series A, because now our portfolio companies are getting to that Series A stage, and we definitely want to do our part to help with introductions, as they look for a lead or look for additional investors for their round. And so on the investor side, those relationships never stop. And on the founder side, it's key. I think that I think it's key. And even when an investor says, passes on investing at a certain stage, I always tell founders, like, don't think of it as just like a no. Think of it as like a no for now. And building the relationship doesn't always have to be conversational. It can be, keeping an investor updated with your newsletter, adding them to that, or sending them quick emails about your progress. All of that matters. An investor might not always respond to everything you send, but they do see it. And so even if you're not always speaking to them on regular one-on-ones, you doing that does also build the relationship. So I would push founders to think of connection and relationship beyond just speaking or trying to get in front of people. It's also doing their part to keep an investor updated via email. But I do think that it is key, and I think that it can help in the fundraising stages as they continue to grow, and it can help. You just never know who the other person knows. And so even if there's a moment where you might meet someone and think, well, they're not a potential investor, so what's the point? You just never know who's in their network, and how they can help you. So I push any founder or investor to just get used to meeting people and communicating, and don't think of it so much as what can they do for me, but just making new connections and seeing maybe you could do something for them as well. And that's just a genuine way to build a relationship. And I think it can help in the future.
Awesome. I love this discussion about relationships. But if I were to call out some of our audience members are actually calling in from Africa. So we have an international community here, and I want to shift it over to Daniel. Now, you're born in Ghana, but raised in Brooklyn. You have roots in both Ghana and the United States. Now, on this topic of relationship building and such with VCs, do you have any advice for folks abroad who want to engage with the VC community here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm glad you pointed it out, Andrew. I'm a proud Ghanaian and also a proud Brooklynite. I think to Pilar's point about the relationship building is nonstop and kind of an evergreen process. For us, all of us here on this panel, we are all entrepreneurial in the things that we're doing, and the relationship piece is key. So for folks who are abroad, and what we also see even in Africa is that the tech scene there is phenomenal. Being from Ghana, I visited Ghana in 2019, and I was able to also go to Kenya and Ethiopia, and I was just so blown away by the tech infrastructure, especially within the fintech space, how that's just accelerating is really exciting there. So with that is, there's also a capital requirement and capital support that's needed. So for the entrepreneurs that are there, just keep staying hungry and reach out to learn. One of the important ways that I've found that's been helpful for me as an entrepreneur, but also as an investor. When we started Visible Hands, we reached out to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of investors. But when reaching out to them, especially in that early stage, for me, my question to them wasn't about giving money, but it was about, hey, can you give me feedback? How can I learn? What are some of the things that I could do to make this better? And that led into relationship building, it led into friendship, and then eventually it led into them investing in me. So keep some of those key things in mind. That is all about building relationships.
Awesome. Great advice, Daniel. Want to bring it back to a general question. So I'll go to Morgan for this question here is, I'm actually very curious here is when you pass on a company, do you ever give specific advice to help that company improve their pitch or prospects for investments? And if not, do you recommend for startups to get their important feedback to improve?
Yeah, this is a great question. I try to be as transparent as possible in my process of what I'm looking for. So in terms of the scout capacity I work in now, I have a very clear thesis and a very clear set of verticals that I invest in. Just given my other job, I don't have time to diligence things or don't have the expertise even to diligence things that fall too far outside of those areas. So if a company is kind of outside of that, I might go into the conversation and just set the stage with like, hey, this is a new area to me. Like, I'm just kind of curious here to learn. Like, let's talk and see what might work out. If it's a company in one of my core competencies that I end up passing on, it often just depends with regard to feedback. I will always try to send an email saying, thank you so much for the time. It's not a fit for me right now. And if the founder follows up and says like, hey, can you please provide like specific elements of why it wasn't a fit, then oftentimes I'll provide additional clarity there. But to what I was saying earlier, it's just not as sustainable necessarily for me to provide specific feedback just from a time perspective. And sometimes maybe founders don't want specific feedback. So I don't necessarily want to provide advice if it's unsolicited, but if they do reach out and specifically ask for it, I'll definitely follow up and just say, hey, here are my thoughts. So that's my perspective on that.
Awesome. And with the same question, I can reiterate, but Paul, just curious on your thoughts as well. I can reiterate if it helps. Or...
No, I think about this a lot of times because this is something that's even part of having that discipline. You can have a what to do list, but it's equally important to have a what not to do list. And that's that clarity and focus that you have to have as a fund, as you're raising a fund, because there's gonna be all these different opportunities. And so we narrowed it down to the specificity of tech-based entrepreneurship as our lens. And so we'll find really awesome people that don't fit our thesis and we can pass them on. But to Morgan's point, we can't always spend a lot of time on that because we're seeing lots of deals and things like that. And there's pent-up demand as a result of people being capped out of traditionally, white-led institutions. So we're seeing a lot of it. And information overload can happen to us too as well. So you have to create a heuristic, a rule of thumb that you're utilizing in order to make the best possible decision. And usually we have what we call our brown venture group way that goes into, does this align with our mission, our values? Because sometimes you can invest into, you may be an entrepreneur that doesn't mesh with the funding. All money's not good money. You want to make sure that you have that kind of relational aspect too. So for us, it's saying no. We have a no because we have this very specific thing we're looking for. And if we can't find it, we definitely have a network we pass people on to people we know.
Awesome. And Pilar, curious about your thoughts as well.
Yeah, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So when you pass on a company, do you ever give specific feedback up that company improve their pitch or prospects?
Yeah. To Morgan's point, like due to time constraints, you try to give a thoughtful email when you're passing. And so I do try to at least give, 1 to 2 reasons of what was the deciding factor for why we passed for at that moment. I think it's just helpful, a founder should be open to that feedback. And I know that when on the investor side, when we've had potential LPs pass on us, I'm always curious of, why. And it's always an opportunity to learn and grow and, adjust a pitch if you need to, or add a slide if you need to. So I think it's the same on the founder side. As we continue down this journey, you have to learn not to take it too personal, which is hard, but it's helpful, and you have to just look at that feedback as, okay, this is an opportunity for me to receive that and grow from it. Or if it's just, like to Paul's point, not every investor is a fit with the founder. So that feedback, you can read it and do what you want. If it seems out of nowhere, then don't take it in and keep it moving. So, but I do try to provide just at least 1 to 2 reasons why.
Yeah, Andrew, can I add here?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So because we have a fund and the accelerator process, we go through an application pool, and last year we received over 900 applicants and accepted 45 companies. But from the 46 till say like 60, they were all really incredible, and it was hard to turn them down. So what my partners and I did was that we basically broke down the folks, it was like 46 to probably get 60. We broke it down and divvied it up across me and my partners, and we called each one of them, to have a conversation and explain our decision, because it's a personal thing for the founders, and if that sometimes it's not realistic to do it for everyone, but there's some folks that for us we were like, we just have to call them, and have a meaningful conversation there.
That's a really good point, Daniel, to add to that. I think when it's a company that maybe we've met with a couple of times and not just like a one intro, then we do try to also, split that up and try to call and just give a quick reason to why. And I think founders, at least when we've done it, founders have always really appreciated that extra step. And so I definitely relate to what Daniel just mentioned.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, great insight there. And now with these next set of questions, I'll ask each and every one of you something that is from your lived experience. So starting with Morgan here. So you are a scout investor at Castona Ventures. What does that mean exactly, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly explain kind of scout programs for those of you who aren't familiar. So I think Sequoia is largely credited with kind of starting the scout programs, like the idea of them, and a bunch of firms now have programs like this. So basically what they are is a firm looks at kind of operators or people in the community that aren't necessarily employed by them, and they say, hey, would you be a scout for our firm? I'm going to give you a pool of money, and you can kind of decide what entrepreneurs to invest in, and how to allocate this pool of capital. So that's effectively what a scout program is. So in my position as a scout for Costa Noa, I basically am just looking out for interesting companies that more fit my personal thesis. And usually I try to go pre-seed and seed. So if Costanoa wants to lead the next round, then I can make that introduction to the founder, and that's advantageous for Costanoa and for the founder themselves. So yeah, it's interesting for firms themselves too, because they are seeing just a little bit different deal flow than they might otherwise see. So having the scouts kind of out there in the community allows them access to different communities, which I think is really impactful. And then in terms of like how mine is structured and how I've seen a lot structured, so I kind of went in and stated like my thesis is identifying mission driven founders pulling forward a data first future. So that is my main filter, and I'm investing in AI/ML, data infrastructure, and GovTech and civic tech, because those are kind of my areas of expertise and where I'm coming from. So that's what I effectively look for within the program, and it's been, every scout I've talked to has felt like it's been super enriching for them and for the firm. So yeah, it's a great experience and opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you, Morgan. And on the topic of just looking and identifying talent, and Paul, you live in Minneapolis and the Midwest region, and I'm curious if you have some of success stories to share on your experience sourcing talent and companies there.
Oh, absolutely. Funny thing about when we started our firm in Minnesota, like, why are you not doing it on the coast? Why are you not doing it, in East Coast or West Coast? And what most people don't realize is that Minnesota, as an example, has the highest per capita Fortune 500 companies in the entire country. We've started 50 Fortune 500 companies have started from here. There's great exit opportunities, and there's a robust ecosystem. Now, to be candid, it wasn't always good for Black people, and brown people in this area. And obviously, we've had George Floyd and others have been right here in the backyard, which has caused a lot of people to, kind of come to the table. But we're finding, great opportunities. Most recently, we made 2 investments in Minnesota-based companies. One was called Nice Healthcare, and they had major funders from the East and West Coast that were looking after them. But they said, Paul, we want you on our cap table because of what you stand for and what it means. And so and our teams all operators, we've all started companies and scaled them in the past. So they knew what they were getting by having an investment from us. And we have another one called Turn Signal, where if you get pulled over by law enforcement, they have a lawyer come up right away, on your phone to kind of de-escalate, both for the law enforcement professional and the driver. And so these are happening because of what, Dante Wright happened here as well. And so we have these solutions that are coming from our region that have high potential. And then obviously in the Midwest, there wasn't a lot of activity. They're starting to see a lot more of that come now because people realize that deal flow comes from all across the country, not just from the East and West Coast. So we're seeing some great opportunities there.
Amazing. And shifting over to Pilar from Debut Capital, and this is based in Brooklyn. I'm curious about any success stories or in this region that you can also highlight and share to the audience as well.
Yeah, I mean, we did get started in good old Dumbo, which is in Brooklyn, but neither of us are in New York at this moment, so we're technically a remote fund. But we have a few deals that are based in New York, but we're we also have a few deals that are in the Midwest and on the West Coast. So we're always open to meeting companies in whatever city they're in. But specific to New York, I would say when we first got started, Ethel's Club was one of the companies that was out in Brooklyn that we reached out to because Debut was just getting started, and we weren't coming from a VC background, so a lot of our investments were through outbound. And I was just such a big fan of Naj and what she was working on with Ethel's Club, and so we reached out to her. And I think the fact that our background was as operators resonated with founders in the early stages. And I use this story as an example because we started speaking with Naj probably March of 2020, and it was Ethel's Club. It was a physical space, and then the pandemic happened, and it was so interesting and really amazing to watch her as a founder pivot and pivot into the digital space. And it wasn't something that just came out of nowhere. That was always on her roadmap. It was just, I think, further down the line. And so it was really fascinating to watch her as a founder see this opportunity. We'll see this, traumatizing event and use it as and see it as an opportunity and know when to pivot. And so, now she's launching Somewhere Good, which is going to be a safe space, a safe digital platform for people of color to create community. And it's just been really great to see her over these couple of years really work on that, get ready to launch that, and take her idea of what was once a physical space into this digital world. So she's Brooklyn based, and yeah, she's great.
Awesome. And Daniel, if you want to share a little bit about your accelerator VC or Invisible Hands, and any insights, and out of curiosity, how much capital do you provide, and is your program region specific?
Yeah, so we're national. We recruit talent from all around the country, and how we have it structured is that we provide an initial investment of $25K to our fellows, and then there's they go through our process with the opportunity to invest an additional up to 150K or more. So we scale from 25 to almost 200 grand. And something that for me I get really excited about, in addition to the capital, is an important piece, but it's not the most important piece. What for us really matters is the hands-on approach. So with our fellows, we've done over 120 projects, ranging from helping design Figma prototypes, clickable prototypes, to deep market research segmentation, because we really see that as that, how can we really provide meaningful hands-on value to our fellows. And then the last thing that I'll add is, when we went out to market to start the process, my partners and I, we were like, we should try to get 500, application pool of 500. And then we doubled that. And what proved to us was the amazing pool of talent that's out there, women and people of color who are building incredible companies. And they're like, I want to, I want to be part of a process. I want to be part of something to really support me get to the next stage. So, the work that all of us are doing on this panel just shows the value, the opportunity sets that are out there. And also, so to LPs who are listening, or, folks who are in the process of also building companies, like, there's support here for you. And we all want to provide avenues and resources to help you get to the next stage.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, great. Great insight there, Daniel. And maybe we're almost at time for Q&A. And maybe very, very quickly, just as a general question, what is the one best resource, like a accelerator, online program, or book that you know of to help startups to prepare for investments? So Morgan, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I really like the online courses that exist. So Brad Feld has a course, NVCA has a course that kind of educate founders and people on the VC side on like what the economics of venture capital look like. And I think being informed on that part of the process is incredibly important. There's also Secrets of Sand Hill Road. There's a bunch of books. I wrote a newsletter on it, with a bunch of resources, because this question comes up a lot and is incredibly important. So happy to send that in the chat afterwards too. But those would be my recommendations.
Awesome. And Paul, what is your advice here?
I just kind of echo what Morgan said. That there's edx.org, free resources that you can jump into. And I know Bill taught a class, Entrepreneurship 101, 102, which was fascinating. It also helps you get prepared to answer questions we need to know about as funders. So that's great. But I also think for the book Leapfrog, if you are a woman and you are looking to get into space, I highly recommend it, because even as a man, I learned so much about my own biases and realized some of the things I was missing out on. But I think it's a really great book to have as all entrepreneurs are looking for funding, because what you learn in there, you can utilize whether that's you're a person of color or a woman, as regards to being a little different. So I like that book.
Great. Pilar, curious of your advice here. The number one resource you would recommend?
I know there's like plenty of books, but I'm a fan of podcasts. I think there are so many podcasts that focus on VCs and one-on-ones with different investors and getting their point of view and what they're looking for. I think that's always helpful. And then a book I recommend that's not so much about prepping for fundraising, but one that we kind of recommend to some of our founders is High Output Management. I think that book is helpful just as you prepare, for that next step, which is, okay, you finish fundraising, now you want to hire, and who are you as a manager? I think we recommend that book. It's helpful.
Yeah. Plus one of that, I've read that book multiple times in my own career. Daniel, what is the best resource that you know to help startups to prepare for investment?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what everybody is saying here, and what I will add is also just entrepreneurs. People that are either in your network or outside of your network. Just like shooting somebody a LinkedIn message to say, "Hey, you just closed this fund. I would love to get 10 minutes of your time to learn about things to avoid and things to do." Like, leverage human beings, and they will help you in ways that sometimes you wouldn't have known what questions to ask, but speaking with them will give you that insight. So leverage human beings.
Awesome. Great tidbits here. And maybe another round general question that I would love to just understand is kind of not the good side. Good side, maybe a bad experience. And this question is aimed at that, which is, can you share with us a horror story or a situation where a company seeking investment just completely mismanaged the opportunity to their own detriment? And hopefully we can learn something about that. So I don't know, anyone here can feel free to jump in and answer that if you have such story.
You want us to air dirty laundry? Is that what you're trying to say?
Hopefully in the aim of learning from mistakes and how the entrepreneurs in this audience can improve their pitch and avoid the pitfalls.
I can't. I mean, there's examples, but I don't want to. I don't want to give too much people information out there. I'll say this: that integrity is super important.
Yeah.
Super important. We cannot afford to not. What's a great area for our counterparts has to be a very clear line. We had to step away from an investment early on because of some character flaws, and because that these flaws could actually cause you to have a bad rep as a fund. And they'll use that one example. There's something in behavioral economics called an availability heuristic, and they'll use that one example and overweight the probability that would happen across all people. Let's go back to back in the 80s when they had the welfare queen, right? That was something that they used to say, look, everybody's doing this when really it's one person, and they overweight it. So I think really stepping into having high integrity, making sure you have people around you that really are mission driven, that are going to walk with integrity is super important as you go through the process. We've had to step away as a result of it.
That's great. Anyone else have some at an extracted level, any insights of a pitch that gone wrong and some learnings that the audience can walk away with?
My only comment, and it's not even directly answering the question, but it's kind of in the same realm, is just fundraising is really hard. Yesterday, I talked to a founder and I was asking him about the fundraising process, and he was like, yeah, for one of my early rounds, I talked to over 100 investors, and it was just a very taxing process. And I mean, my level of empathy increases every day for kind of that process. And yeah, it must be hard, but I think Paul put it perfectly when he mentioned, like, I think on both sides, everyone should just operate with the level of integrity. I think everyone in the ecosystem kind of recognizes how difficult the process of building and funding a company is. So.
And I'll add to that, I think oftentimes in the early days of starting companies, there's a proclivity to focus on, let me get the money and everything will figure itself out. But I think it's really important for founders to spend time on really, really diving deeper into the problem, and having a strong grip on the problem. So founders that I think have struggled is the ones that are so quick to say, I have a solution, without truly understanding. And then money and time and resources are wasted. In fact, I was speaking with a founder the other day, and he said that he spent over $100,000 on a product that nobody wanted. I mean, that's just imagine that, right? So really, really honing on the problem, and that helps you really go through the customer validation piece.
I want to add just one piece to this too, because I think it's super important that entrepreneurs know themselves. Like, you see entrepreneurs that if you don't have a great self-awareness, you don't even know how to put the proper rails in front of you, to create that what not to do list. And so I spend a lot of time with entrepreneur development as far as how are you wired? What are the things you're going to be tempted to do or not do as a result of how you're wired and the lens that you're using? To your point, if you can go out and think you have the hottest product in the world, but if you haven't talked to customers, you got nothing. So like, it's the same thing when it came to solutions in our community. People skip the relationship when it comes to, like, how do we work with and partner with communities of color. They thought, I know what people wanted, what they needed, versus actually asking us, what do we need? We need capital in our hands to invest into our communities to get at bats. That's it.
Awesome. Okay, looks like I just got pinged a question for Morgan. If you find a founder that's the right fit in your vertical, let's say founder's ask is $1 million in exchange for up to 25% equity, what carry fee should a scout ask for in the agreement?
Yeah, so this is a great question. In my experience, the scout programs that I'm familiar with, the scout carry is pre-negotiated with the firm that you're working with. So the scout is actually going in and maybe asking for, like, information rights or like some different abilities, but in my experience, I have not actually negotiated carry in that setup, just because it's already prearranged. And the scout programs for which I'm familiar with how they're structured, I think they have all kind of done that in advance. And I think it just streamlines the process, right? A lot of times scout checks are relatively small. So the founder doesn't want additional overhead and negotiation. They just want to have a value add person as part of their orbit. And so I think, to the extent these programs can be lightweight, it actually really benefits the person that's fundraising. So that's just my experience. There may be other programs that are different.
Awesome. Thank you. And we're almost at the top of the hour, and we'll love to just finish off with the question I love to ask panelists. What is one word that you would describe to encourage entrepreneurs as they're seeking investments in the upcoming year? We'll start with Daniel. Just one word, one final thought you would like to leave with the audience to encourage them as they pursue their fundraising.
I think he's frozen.
All right, we'll pop it over to you, Paul.
I would say, tenacity and resiliency. I know it's like both of them. Like, you're gonna have to have thick skin. You got to realize that some of this is a lack of not understanding. It's not personal. They don't have any relationship with communities of color, so you're kind of the first person they may be talking with. So you got to have some grace with them a little bit, but you have to have the tenacity and thick skin and know you keep on building a relationship, and eventually you're humanizing yourself to them, so it can open the relationship for investment. But tenacity.
Tenacity, love it. Pilar?
Yeah, I don't, tenacity and, resilience are good words. I don't know the right word, but I will say, kind of minimizing your ego and just having an open mind for anything, feedback. I think it's very much needed on the investor side and on the founder side, is just putting that ego aside and just having an open mind.
Humility, and
That's the
being
word.
humble.
There it is.
I love it. I love it. Morgan, one adjective or word.
Yeah, mine would be authenticity. I think the most exciting thing for me about this industry is just meeting all of these amazing people. Everyone has such a unique story and is coming to the industry from a different place. And I think that is just like the promise of what this industry has to offer. So I think just people coming into pitches, conversations, customer calls, and just being their authentic selves as an entrepreneur is really what I look for and think is amazing and inspiring.
Amazing. And Daniel, hopefully you're connected. One
Yes.
word. Oh, hey.
Yes, you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, mine is perseverance. This journey of building a company, it's hard, and there'll be a lot of ups and downs. So don't give up. Just persevere through it. You will hear. There's no doubt you're going to hear many, 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 many no's, but you only need a few yeses. So just persevere.
Amazing. And with that, this concludes our session. I really, really want to thank the time of Daniel, Paul, Pilar, and Morgan. Amazing insights. And I'm sure the audience, including myself, appreciate all the words and encouragement you provided in the last hour.